Hi and welcome back to Reddit Whispers. I'm going to tell you a story about foundations. I spent my life building them both literally and figuratively. I believe in things you can touch, things that are real, solid wood, level floors, and a good, honest day's work. I built a small empire for my family on this philosophy, a portfolio of properties that was meant to be our fortress, our legacy. I was the one who laid the bricks, who fixed the leaks, who kept the walls strong. She, my wife, was the architect of the accounts, the guardian of the numbers, the one I trusted to keep the foundation of our business sound. This story is about discovering that while I was busy maintaining the visible structure, she was secretly, systematically hollowing out the ground beneath it. It's about the horrifying realization that our fortress was not a home, but a stage, and the quiet, respectable business I was killing myself to run was just the public face for a secret, illicit empire she was building in the shadows, an empire that was about to bring the whole world crashing down on my head. Our business model was simple and, I thought, honorable. We bought undervalued properties, duplexes and small apartment buildings in working-class neighborhoods, and we fixed them up ourselves. I was the labor. My hands, my back, my sweat. That was our primary investment. I would spend my days, my nights, my weekends in a cloud of drywall dust and paint fumes, bringing these tired, neglected buildings back to life. I took a deep, profound pride in it. I wasn't just a landlord, I was a craftsman, a builder, a man providing clean, safe, respectable homes for families. She was the brain. She had a mind for numbers that was a thing of beauty. She managed the books, the leases, the taxes, the online booking systems. She was the one who found the deals, who saw the potential in a property that others overlooked. I trusted her completely. Our partnership was a perfect symbiosis. I would come home, exhausted and covered in filth, and I would hand her a shoebox full of receipts from the hardware store. She would transform that chaotic mess into neat, clean, logical spreadsheets. She was the one who made sense of the world, who turned my physical labor into a tangible, growing number on a balance sheet. Our life was not glamorous. We lived frugally, pouring every spare dollar back into the business. We were building something, something for our future, something solid. The first tremor in that foundation came in a plain white envelope from the IRS. It was a notice of an audit. I wasn't worried. We were, I believed, meticulous. She was meticulous. I handed her the letter and she scanned it with a calm, almost dismissive sigh. "Bureaucratic nonsense," she said, her voice a reassuring balm on my momentary anxiety. "They do these random checks. It's a fishing expedition. Don't worry about it. I'll handle it." And I believed her. I went back to fixing a subfloor in our newest property, the letter completely forgotten, my faith in her competence absolute. But then came the second letter. This one was not a polite notice. It was a preliminary finding, a cold, terrifying document filled with numbers that made no sense. It spoke of gross income discrepancies and underreported earnings. It listed a potential tax liability, with penalties and interest, that was a staggering, life-altering sum. It was a number so large it would not just cripple us, it would annihilate us. I confronted her with this letter, my hands trembling, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. This time her calm was gone. It was replaced by a righteous, performative fury, an anger directed not at the reality of the numbers but at the incompetence of the government. "They're insane," she raged, pacing the kitchen. "They've mixed up our file with someone else's. This is a witch hunt. How dare they accuse us of this?" She was so convincing, so utterly indignant that she swept my own fear up in her storm of anger. She promised she would hire a lawyer, that she would fight it, that she would make them pay for this slander. She was my warrior, my champion, defending our honor against a faceless, incompetent bureaucracy. I watched her, my heart swelling with a mixture of love and a terrible, shared fear. I felt a surge of protective instinct. I knew what I had to do. I had to work harder, finish the renovations faster, get the new units rented out, to generate the income we would need for the legal battle to come. I retreated to the only place I felt I had any control, the world of wood and nails and plaster. I worked until my body screamed, fueled by a righteous anger and a desperate need to protect my family, to save our dream. I had no idea that I was not fighting an external enemy. I was a foot soldier in a war that had already been lost, and I was taking my orders from the enemy general. The legal battle was a slow, grinding siege. The initial fury gave way to a long, grueling war of attrition fought with documents and depositions. She hired a tax attorney, an expensive, slick man who spoke in a language of loopholes and extensions that I didn't understand. She would attend the meetings alone, insisting that I was needed at the properties, that my time was better spent generating income than sitting in a stuffy office. "You're the heart of this business," she would say, her hand on my cheek. "Let me be the shield." The legal fees were a constant, draining hemorrhage of our already strained finances. To cover them, we had to start taking out loans, leveraging the very properties that were the source of the dispute. The beautiful, solid empire we had built was now being used as collateral to fight a battle I didn't understand. The stress was immense. I was working myself into the ground, a ghost haunting my own properties, patching, painting, fixing, a frantic, desperate effort to keep everything from collapsing. My pride as a craftsman was gone, replaced by the grim, joyless efficiency of a man just trying to stay afloat. And through it all, she was my rock. She was calm, resilient, a beacon of strength in the storm. Her reports from the legal front were always cautiously optimistic. The lawyer was making progress. They were finding holes in the IRS's case. It was a long fight, she would say, but a fight we were going to win. I started to notice small changes in her, things that at the time I attributed to the immense pressure she was under. She became more secretive with her work, her laptop snapping shut whenever I entered the room. She started taking long, late-night walks to clear her head, her phone pressed to her ear in a hushed, intense conversation. I told myself it was the lawyer, the stress, the fight. My trust in her was a fortress, and I refused to acknowledge the cracks that were beginning to appear in its walls. The first real fissure came from an unlikely source. One of our long-term tenants, a quiet, elderly woman who had lived in one of our duplexes for years, stopped me in the hallway one afternoon. She looked worried. "Is everything all right next door?" she asked, her voice a low whisper. "The new tenants, they're very noisy, and there are so many different people coming and going at all hours. It feels more like a hotel than a home." I was confused. The unit next to her was, according to the lease she had shown me, rented to a single graduate student. I reassured the woman that I would look into it. That night I asked her about it. "Oh, that," she said with a wave of her hand. "The student's friends come over to study. You know how it is. I'll have a word with her about the noise." It was a plausible explanation, and I accepted it. But the woman's words, "It feels more like a hotel," had planted a seed of unease. A few weeks later, I was doing a late-night repair on a broken water heater at another property. It was a building that was supposed to be fully occupied by long-term tenants. But as I was leaving, around 2 in the morning, I saw a group of people, dressed for a party, spill out of one of the units, laughing and shouting as they got into a waiting Uber. They were not the young family that was supposed to be living there. My unease was now a low, insistent hum. The next day I did something I had never done before. I decided to check the books myself. I felt like a traitor, a spy in my own house. I waited until she was out and I went to her computer. I opened the accounting software she used, the one she had so proudly shown me years ago. I looked at the rent rolls, the income statements. Everything was exactly as it should be. The graduate student was listed. The young family was listed. The income reported to the IRS, the income that was the source of our legal battle, was all there, neat and tidy. For a moment I felt a wave of relief and shame. I was being paranoid, but the seed of doubt refused to die. I started digging deeper into her computer, not as a husband, but as an investigator. I searched for the names of our properties, and I found a hidden folder, one that was not linked to the main accounting software. Inside was a second set of books. It was a completely different ledger. This ledger didn't show monthly rent payments. It showed nightly rates. It showed cleaning fees and weekend surcharges. The income, the real income, was a staggering, unbelievable number. It was 10 times, 20 times what was on the official books. It was a fortune, and the tenants were not listed by name. They were a series of anonymous bookings from a website I had never heard of, a high-end, exclusive platform that marketed properties not as homes, but as private event venues and luxury short-term stays. The graduate student, the young family, they were fictions, names on a fake lease designed for the tax man. The real business, the one that was generating a river of secret cash, was something else entirely. It was a shadow empire operating in parallel to the one I thought we were building together. The IRS wasn't mistaken. They weren't incompetent. They had caught a glimpse of the truth. The income discrepancy was real. The fraud was real. And the architect of that fraud was my wife, my partner, the woman I had trusted to be the shield for our family. I felt as if I had been physically struck. I sat in her chair in her office, staring at the two sets of books, the two realities, and the world tilted on its axis. The woman I had been married to for 15 years was a stranger. The business I had poured my life into was a lie. The noble craftsman building homes for families was a chump, a fool, the unwitting janitor for a secret, illicit enterprise. My entire identity, my entire reality, was built on a foundation of her deception. My first instinct was a primal, white-hot rage. I wanted to smash the computer, to confront her, to scream and rage and demand an answer to the single, howling question in my mind. Why? But the logical part of my brain, the part that knows how to build things, how to analyze structures, took over. I knew an emotional confrontation would be a disaster. She was a master of manipulation. She would twist it, deny it, turn it back on me. I needed more than just a secret spreadsheet. I needed to see the operation with my own eyes. I needed irrefutable proof. I became a ghost in my own empire. I started watching our properties, not as a handyman, but as a detective. I would park down the street late at night in my work van and I would watch. And what I saw confirmed the cold, hard data on the secret ledger. It wasn't just short-term rentals. It was a full-blown, high-end, illegal hotel and party business. I saw limousines pulling up to our working-class duplexes. I saw catered parties with bartenders and DJs in apartments that were supposed to be quiet homes. I saw groups of men in expensive suits coming and going from one of our buildings at 3 in the morning, carrying briefcases. The constant repairs, the mysterious damage, the things I had chalked up to irresponsible tenants, it all made a horrifying kind of sense now. I was not just the fixer. I was the cleanup crew for her shadow business. I was the one who came in the next day to repair the drywall, to snake the drains clogged with party debris, to repaint the walls marked up by drunken strangers. My backbreaking labor was not an investment in our future. It was a line item in her cost of doing business. The final piece of the puzzle was understanding where the money was going. The secret ledger showed the income, but the transfers out were all going to a single, anonymous corporate account under a generic LLC name I didn't recognize. To get inside that, I knew I would need to get inside her phone. This was the ultimate violation, the final, irrevocable step across a line I never thought I would cross. I waited until she was in the shower, my heart a frantic, guilty hammer in my chest. I took her phone. Her password was, I discovered with a fresh wave of nausea, the date we had bought our first property together. I found what I was looking for in a hidden photo album. It was not pictures of friends or family. It was a series of screenshots and photographs of another life. A life she was planning to live without me. There were pictures of a stunning, modern house on a beach somewhere tropical. There were architectural plans. There were receipts for wire transfers to an offshore bank. And there was a series of saved, intimate chat messages with another man, a man whose name I recognized with a jolt of pure, cold shock. He was our lawyer, the expensive, slick tax attorney who was supposed to be our shield, our champion in the fight against the IRS. They were not just lovers, they were partners. The entire IRS battle, the thing that had been the source of our shared stress and my own desperate overwork, was a sham. It was a carefully orchestrated piece of theater designed to keep me distracted, to bleed us of our remaining legitimate money in legal fees, and to create a plausible reason for our eventual financial collapse. The plan was clear, laid out in their own arrogant, self-congratulatory words. They were going to let the IRS liens and penalties grow until the properties were seized and auctioned off. They would use their hidden, untaxed fortune to buy back the assets for pennies on the dollar, free and clear of the debt and of me. I was not just being cheated on financially and personally. I was being systematically erased. I was the workhorse who had built the farm, and now that the harvest was in, I was being sent to the glue factory. I put the phone back on her nightstand, my hands steady now, the guilt replaced by an absolute, diamond-hard clarity. The confrontation was not going to be about a betrayal. It was going to be about a war for my life, for my name, and for the last, tattered remnants of the legacy I had almost let her steal. The confrontation was a quiet, deliberate demolition. I chose the time and place with the precision of a sapper setting a charge. It was a Sunday morning, the one day of the week we still tried to pretend was normal, the one day we sat down together for breakfast like the couple I thought we were. I let her pour the coffee, I let her talk about the weather, and then I laid a single piece of paper on the table between us. It was a printout of a bank statement from her secret offshore account, the one I had found a record of on her phone. She looked at the paper. Her hand, the one holding her coffee cup, froze halfway to her mouth. The color drained from her face. The cheerful domestic mask she wore so effortlessly dissolved, and for the first time I saw the woman who lived beneath it, a cold, calculating, and now cornered predator. "The legal fees are getting expensive," I said, my voice a flat, emotionless monotone. "I was just thinking, maybe we could use some of this to help pay for our shield." She didn't speak for a long time. The silence in the kitchen was absolute, broken only by the quiet hum of the refrigerator. She slowly, deliberately placed her coffee cup back on its saucer. When she finally looked up at me, her eyes were not filled with remorse or fear. They were filled with a pure, undiluted rage. It was the anger of a queen whose kingdom had just been invaded by a peasant she had long since dismissed as irrelevant. "You had no right," she hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper. "That was my business, my work, my money." "Your business," I replied, a cold, humorless laugh escaping my lips. "Was it your back that ached after you redoled the bathroom in Unit 3B? Was it your hands that were raw after you refinished the floors in the duplex? That was my work, my sweat. You weren't a business owner. You were a parasite living off my labor while you pretended to be a partner." "You were labor," she spat, her voice dripping with a contempt that was more shocking than any confession could have been. "You were good with your hands, a useful, simple tool. I was the visionary. I saw the real potential, a potential you were too small, too scared, too obsessed with your working-class, lunch-pail morality to ever grasp. I built an empire while you were busy fixing toilets and you were too stupid to even notice." Her words were meant to be a final, crushing blow, a confirmation of my own pathetic irrelevance in her grand scheme. But they had the opposite effect. In that moment of pure, unadulterated venom, she gave me the one thing I needed. She gave me back myself. I was not a fool. I was a man who had been manipulated by a master. My trust was not a weakness. It was the mark of a decent man. My hard work was not simple labor. It was the honest expression of my character. The shame I had been carrying, the feeling of being a failure, evaporated, burned away by the clean, righteous fire of my anger. "You didn't build an empire," I said, my voice steady and clear now, the voice of a man who finally knew exactly who he was and who he was dealing with. "You built a house of cards on a foundation of lies, and I'm about to pull the bottom card." I stood up from the table. "You have two choices," I said, laying out the terms of her surrender. "Choice one, you walk away, you disappear. You sign over your half of what's left of the legitimate business to me, and you take your secret money and your lawyer and you vanish. I will not come after you. I will not go to the police. I will deal with the IRS and the fallout on my own. I will give you your freedom in exchange for mine." "And choice two?" she asked, a defiant sneer on her lips. Choice two, I said, is that I take every piece of evidence I have, the second set of books, the photos of your parties, the bank records, the recordings of your phone calls I've been making for the past month, and I walk into the office of the district attorney and the IRS at the same time. I will burn this entire world to the ground. You will go to prison. Your lawyer will be disbarred. And I will gladly go down with the ship just for the satisfaction of watching you drown. I let the choice hang in the air between us. It was the ultimate gamble, a bluff that was not a bluff. She stared at me, her mind, for the first time, visibly scrambling, assessing the new, unexpected variables. She was a strategist, and I had just presented her with an unwinnable game. She had mistaken my decency for weakness, my trust for stupidity. And that was the fatal flaw in her otherwise brilliant plan. She had underestimated her most valuable asset and her greatest threat, me. The days that followed were a tense, silent negotiation conducted through lawyers, but the outcome was never in doubt. She was a pragmatist and she knew a losing hand when she saw one. She chose to survive. She chose to run. I watched from the window as she packed her car. She didn't look back. She simply got in and drove away, a ghost vanishing from a life she had only ever intended to haunt temporarily. The silence she left behind was different. It was not the silence of a shared, unspoken grief. It was the clean, quiet, and profoundly liberating silence of a space that was finally completely my own. The aftermath was a financial apocalypse. The IRS liens, the lawsuits, the debts, they were all very real. I had to do what she had always planned to do. I declared bankruptcy. I lost the properties. The empire, both the real one and the shadow one, was liquidated, sold off in a grim, joyless auction to satisfy the creditors. I was left with nothing but my tools, my work van, and a mountain of debt that the bankruptcy couldn't erase, the moral debt I owed to my own name. I started over, not as a landlord, not as an empire builder. I went back to being the man I was at the very beginning, a craftsman. I started a small one-man handyman and renovation business. I work with my hands. I fix what is broken. The work is hard, the money is modest, but it is honest. It is real. Every invoice I write, every check I deposit is a small act of reclamation. I am rebuilding my life, not with leverage and ambition, but with sawdust and sweat. The foundation is smaller this time, but it is solid. It is built on the bedrock of my own integrity, a bedrock that I now know can withstand any storm. I learned that the most valuable property you can ever own is a clear conscience. It's the one asset no one can ever steal from you, and the one legacy that is truly worth building. Thank you for tuning in to Reddit Whispers. We've all faced moments when everything felt broken. What was your turning point? Leave it in the comments, because your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now.